Oh, hey, Chris.
Hey Chuck, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's a weekend and I'm in my basement. Looks like you're in a basement too.
I am in a basement, and funny enough, I was in a basement here this morning. I've been having some fun Zoom time. We had our I'm in a travel club of other hand surgeons of my generation, so nobody old like you. But we got together on Zoom this morning. It was great, and everybody was catching up. And somebody was talking about how they just bought a beach home, and I was like, "Well, you have two homes, and I currently have zero homes." So I'm living in my friend's basement right now, or our family is living in their basement now because we sold our house and we closed, which is great. But we are still waiting for our new place to be done.
Wow. When was your new place supposed to be done?
2 months ago.
Wow. Are there penalties built in for the builder?
We thought about doing that, but I also didn't want them to rush in terms of taking shortcuts. And it's obviously a very delicate relationship to balance. You know, you're going to be paying somebody. We're under contract for the finished product, although we have had our hands in the design of the renovations and the addition. So it's kind of an interesting situation in which we kind of bought in early, put down more earnest money on it than probably required, but that way we got some customization options.
And what's the ETA?
I don't know. I'm hoping we only have a couple more episodes after doing my friend's basement. Although he's got a great ring light and his internet's awesome, so it's been working out okay.
Oh Lord, I hope you're not judging all time by episode or episodes recorded.
No, but the kids have been playing and stuff, and they're it's been fun. The novelty is still there. Let's hope that we don't outstay our welcome. We're always ready to pivot to the old Homewood suites.
Perfect. Well, we're going to talk a little businessy, well, sort of business talk today. And I understand you had a special guest to your travel club today along those same lines.
Yeah, so esteemed distinguished professor Ken Yamaguchi from our department came and was our speaker, and he gave a great talk on a couple topics. One was on managing teams, and the other was just on essential leadership principles. And I thought they were great, and I've been fortunate enough to have Ken as a mentor for me personally since starting at WashU. And it's been really useful to meet with him on a regular basis. I at this point we've kind of phased out the regular meetings, but for the first 5 years of my practice, those were incredibly helpful. It was good to have a sounding board outside of the hand service. And with the context of him also having gone after R01 funding and doing all of those things. And he clearly has a different role now as the chief medical officer of Centene, but he still does some clinical activity at WashU. And it was great catching up and hearing him share his knowledge.
I bet it was. I bet it was. It does resonate as, I'm putting together the upcoming year, what we call Leadership for Achievement, which is our department's formal leadership educational process. And we have three great business school professors coming over to discuss various different topics. And I actually had a meeting this week on finalizing those. So I enjoy those lessons and certainly have a lot to learn. So I'm a little jealous.
Well, I am looking forward to this year's Leadership for Achievement. Some of the feedback we got from our fellows, our hand fellows this year, was the request for more leadership training. So it's going to be great to be able to work in some of those Leadership for Achievement talks into their fellowship. So we're looking forward to having that. It's great to have in our department. I did manage to make it through the entire travel club meeting without plugging the podcast. I don't know what I was thinking though.
You managed to avoid plugging. How could you let that happen? What an opportunity wasted.
An opportunity wasted. I'm pretty sure I know that Micah Sinclair listens, so shout out to Micah. Thanks for always listening to us. You probably don't get you probably get too much of us because you also join us for Monday morning conference, and we love having you.
That is true. Well, maybe we do one more thing before we jump into the podcast, which I think is going to be really fun. Any reviews to share?
We have a great review from a wonderful person that's known to many on social media, Mike Galvez. So Mike, I actually met with Mike one time at an ASSH meeting because I saw he was doing all this really cool mentoring stuff on social media, and I just wanted to see kind of what his vibe was and where he was going with it. And he has an incredible reach, an incredible following. And Mike, I mean, the work you're doing in mentoring undergrads, medical students, residents, it's incredible. So I'm flattered that you left us this great review, 5 stars, again, the only option, of course. And it says, the subject is, feels like I'm doing a mini fellowship at WashU, which honestly, that in and of itself is kind of our goal, I think, or one of the unstated goals. And he goes on to write very kindly, it's great to have a relatable podcast where the nuances of hand trauma, sports, congenital, and nerve nerding out all come together. The bonuses of hearing the challenges of being in practice are helpful, especially for those of us early in our careers. We all have mentors and colleagues, but it's fantastic to hear the experience and thoughtfulness from you both. Gracias.
Well, that's great. And I have not met Mike in person. I do recognize that he is really does a nice job on social media. We have shared a patient, and he was beyond helpful and supportive in that process. So I look forward to meeting him hopefully at the next Hand Society meeting.
Well, you have some shared lineage. I believe you spent some time down at Texas Scottish Rite. I know that you spent a little bit of time hanging out down there, and he actually helped you out a little bit with your Spanish by throwing in that gracias at the end there. So I'll
Can
let
you
you
help me?
throw in your donata.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about how my Spanish is coming. Let's talk about something fun. How about that?
Well, it's summertime, which I think this year, but obviously pre-COVID years especially, typically means vacation. So let's talk a little bit about vacation and the importance of it. I mean, when was the last vacation that a true vacation that you really took?
So our last family vacation, and let me be very clear, there's no mixing meetings with vacation for me. My wife has just not been supportive of that. She doesn't come with me to meetings for the most part, and so it's really a vacation is a vacation, a work meeting is a work meeting. And so when I think vacation, occasionally my wife and I have been fortunate enough to get away. But the real last family vacation, as I think about it, was pre-pandemic. December of 2019, we did something super fun. We went to Costa Rica, so that was fantastic. What about you?
I think the last one we did was when we went down to Houston a few weeks ago. It was kind of a weird kind of time for vacation. I mean, we were spending some time with family down there, and honestly helping get everything tidied up in my father-in-law's house. So my last vacation was spent doing a lot of packing. And then I can't really remember a true. I guess I could look back like a true vacation before then. We've had some planned, but then obviously the pandemic has changed that. We've done like some kind of long weekend away kind of things, just driving to places from here, and those have left me very recharged. I think we've talked about it on kind of the intro on some of the prior podcasts about kind of that 4-day weekend being so great.
Yeah, and we're going to get into this and some of the science behind it. I do appreciate those long weekends. I don't know that if I think there's worth and there's value in those type of longer weekends, but I really do think a week at a minimum, not that I've ever taken more than a week, but I think a week is what really helps me to recharge.
Well, so that everybody understands the context, how much vacation do you think you take in a year, and how has that changed over time since you started working as an attending back in the early aughts? So how has that changed as your family has grown, as your practice has evolved?
Well, certainly the type of vacation we consider is very different with older kids. My kids are in college or nearly there, and we can do just amazingly different things, very outdoorsy, very hiking centered, or travel kind of anywhere and everything. And that's been a priority for our family. I feel like my wife and I both agree that trying to expose our kids to different cultures is part of what we want to do. But to get to your question, I think it's probably a sensitive one that my wife and I have discussed, in that I don't do well on the taking sufficient vacation. As I recall, we get about 20 days a year, 20 work days a year, maybe 22 work days a year. And I've never taken that.
Roughly 4 weeks, right? If you put it in business days.
Yeah, roughly 4 weeks. I think I've taken 3 good weeks before. I've never taken four. What about you?
I think pre-pandemic, the most I've done is three. And then I think what it ends up averaging to is like 2 really good weeks. But then also days tacked on here and there on like holiday weekends, kind of, or something like that.
And have you ever taken more than a good full week?
In in residency.
Oh, ouch.
Well, it was one of those things where, my wife and I were both residents at the same time. So we were always trying to like finesse our vacation schedules, which, is possible in some programs and impossible in other programs. And I was able to finesse it one time where it was the last week off of one rotation and the first week off of a different rotation. And it was an amazing time, but it was a little hard to get back.
Well, and that's always the give and take, right? The longer you take, the harder it is. It's hard taking 1 week. You pay for it before, you pay for it after. But some of our partners have taken 2 weeks, and I get it because it absolutely takes me a couple of days to wind down and stop thinking about work and get into the vacation mindset. And then the last couple of days are usually spent with anxiety over getting, not anxiety, but thinking about work.
Well, that's one of the things that they mentioned in the article that we're going to talk about is, how do you truly unplug? And then, how do you manage ramping back up? I mean, I recently, even coming back from Houston, I certainly paid for that when I came back. My first clinics were completely overbooked. And then also, in a way, like sometimes your case volume goes down because you're not seeing fractures the week before. So it's just, for somebody who's still in that kind of, tenuous practice building phase, you definitely notice a difference. And I'm sure our colleagues that are in private practice or employed models will feel the same way too, not just in academics.
Oh, I think it's universal, for sure. I yeah, I think it's about for what do I think what as I think about vacations, it's really just having control of my time. And of course, every resident and fellow out there is thinking, well, you have control of your time. We do not. But even and I don't know how you feel, but I don't feel like I have complete control of my time and my schedule. And for example, I did a really interesting case we'll talk about sometime in the future. Last Wednesday, and then I called the family Wednesday night as I do, and sounded a little precarious that pain was under great control. And then I talked to him again that night, and then they ended up coming back to the hospital. And I wasn't on call, but these are just the things that we do. And so on vacation, while those problems don't always go away, I just feel like it allows me to refocus. I read a lot more. I'm more active. So, how do you think about your goals, I guess, during a vacation?
Well, I mean, I honestly, I really do. I know it's a good vacation when I've been able to sit down and read a book. Like, real, if when I get to that point, that means that I'm in like absolute chill mode. If it was up to me, and I'll ask you the same thing. I mean, I think that my wife pushes me in a different direction, which is good. If it was up to me, I probably would just park myself on a beach and sit on the beach and try to just sit and read books. And she has, and I think in a good way, kind of pushed us towards exploring new cities, exploring environments and all this stuff, and kind of getting up off of our behinds. Because I feel like before I met my wife, I probably would have been the type of person, and there's nothing against this kind of person who would go to the same place every time and have the same routine on vacation and just completely unwind.
Well, I could not agree more. We are very fortunate in the opportunities that we are provided as physicians, and having kids. And so as I mentioned, I think it is something that my wife and I take seriously to try to expose our kids to other cultures, the joy of travel, learning new things. And it is a very different vacation. So later this coming week, I'm going to go up to New Hampshire and hang out with my wife and her family. And that'll be a quieter vacation because my kids are older. I will have time to read, and I'll work out every day, and that'll be great. The vacations where we are traveling are not quite as restful on a physical standpoint, but I think mentally they're more restful because it requires that I check out completely. If I'm sitting there reading a book on the lake, or even running, then somehow or another, certainly on day 1 and 2, work is in my mind. By day 3 and 4, less so. But the doing of something completely different in a different culture, in a different environment, requires my attention, which is good.
Well, that's like one of those things about the staycation, right? Like the staycation seems like it's going to be fantastic. You save a ton of dough, you don't have to do a ton of planning, but then you're still immersed in your world. And on a related note, like, one of the great things about our fellowship in the pre-pandemic part of it was that we would send you to India to learn microsurgery. And Yes, it's the same exact course you would get if you did the Ackland course or the Ackland principles in Louisville, or you went to the Great Columbia micro course or the Great Mayo micro course. The same thing. But the fact that you are completely immersed in that, that is the only thing on your mind. Your phone doesn't get service. You're literally half a world away. I found that personally when I did that as a fellow to be tremendously helpful to just really focus in on the microsurgery, really focus on seeing all the wonderful things that they do in Coimbatore at Ganga Hospital. Um, that immersive experience helps because there's nothing else on your mind. You can't worry about patients. You can't worry about other things because, that's the only, you're in India. So I think there's absolute value to that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this. What I miss most about playing basketball as I've gotten so freaking old is I don't have that immersive athletic experience because whether I'm biking or running or whatever I may be doing, my mind can wander. When you're all in on some activity, and for me, if I'm in a foreign land with a foreign language, I'm like, just trying to survive. You can't think about anything else, and immersion is good. Immersion is good.
So for the record, when did you stop playing ball? Because I remember when I was a fellow and then early on in practice, I'd always hear from like random people, man, like Goldfarb can ball. Like you were part of these games at like either the center of Clayton or some gym on the medical school campus that probably doesn't exist anymore. That you were hanging. Like tell us a little. I know this is not the topic, but I want this on record about the Goldfarb basketball experience.
Yeah, it was a combination of factors. I don't like to think it was the game going south. I'm sure that was part of it. No, it was a combination of injuries with a lack of serious injuries. And limp, the nurses, I remember I used to play on Tuesdays and Fridays at 6 a.m. Those happened to be my Shriners Hospital days, which early in my career I didn't have 6 a.m. meetings every day. And so I could play ball at 6 and go to the Shriners Hospital. It was perfect. But I'd always limp around. The nurses were always giving me grief. Even when I was young, I would limp around. So at some point it just became not worth it, and I miss the hanging out, and I miss the immersion. I don't miss everything else.
Well, your Achilles tendons. Thank you for not for not continuing down that path.
It's
So
true.
who plans vacations in the Goldfarb family? Like, do you and Talia set aside the time together on the calendar? And then who decides where to go and what kind of vacation it's going to be, and then executes a plan or develops a plan and then executes it.
Yeah, I have to say I'm lucky in that Talia, I think I can say she enjoys it. She does most of the planning. We'll talk about where we want to go and what we want to do. So what cities we want to see, what are important sites to see if we're going overseas. Um, the logistics, I think she has taken ownership of more, um, which I appreciate. I like to be a follower on vacation in large part. Um, and thankfully, she's allowed me to do that. Certainly, there are certain responsibilities that are mine, which is like driving overseas would be me if we're going to drive and things like that. But we have it's definitely a mutual planning experience, but I don't plan the details and try to sit back. What about you?
Uh, we set aside the dates together, and then Tiffany does the rest. She's really good. It's actually funny. One of the first trips we took as a couple was to New York City, which got us hooked on New York and got us like thinking, let's do our residency there. And I planned everything. We still have the itinerary, and I think it's the last trip she let me completely plan, because she has taken over it. She's a pro. She honestly could be a travel agent in a different life. One question I had for you is, do you take less or more vacation now than you did when you started? And when, on a parenting note, when does it stop becoming traveling with kids and more taking vacation?
I think when I think about the last quote unquote vacation that still felt like, gosh, we can't quite do everything because of the age of our kids. And we went to Sedona I think it was spring break to hike, and we went to other parts of Arizona as well. And the two older kids would just, run ahead and do what they wanted to do. And Macy, who's 16 now, was probably 10ish, and she certainly could more than keep up. But there still were things we probably didn't do. I think once 10, 11, 12, it becomes traveling with three adults. So the five of us, have without any limitations or hesitations. And in fact, the limitations and hesitations are more those of Talia and myself rather than the kids. And so it's a totally different world. Totally.
So we're going to talk. We started thinking about this topic because, we're both on the old HBR listserv, and we got this article that came out. And for those of you that are paying attention at home and want to read it, it's the reprint number is H06CEW. So, they go through a series of principles about vacation. And one of the things in there is to plan at least 3 months in advance. Do you feel, I mean, honestly, for a surgeon's schedule, 3 months in advance is great. I remember Rick Wright saying, I can do anything in terms of scheduling, just give me at least 6 weeks.
For sure. So first of all, plan, plan, plan. It's too valuable a time to not have everything planned out. And I will say that doesn't mean that there are parts of a day that are not scheduled, but everything is planned. So where you're going to be, how you're going to get there, where you're going to stay, the key things you got to do. But absolutely, we probably look for 6 months in advance. Pick a time, pick a place, and get going on it.
So how much of that planning thing do you think is just making sure that you get the most out of it versus wanting to look forward to it, like having it set in stone and saying like, okay, the weeks are, ticking down the weeks here.
Absolutely, and absolutely could not agree more. And at the risk of seeming like the dorky father, one of the things that we asked our kids to do was to read up on something about the spot that we're traveling to. And I may have mentioned this to you before.
No,
And
you have mentioned that. That's really interesting.
yeah, so at some point it was a PowerPoint. Don't judge me.
That is gold. That is classic
It's
gold farm.
rich. It's rich.
Oh,
But it was like, all right, if we're going to Italy, pick a site and teach me something about it. And that can be verbally or whatever you want to do, but really own a site. And then when we get to that site, kind of take the lead on it. And that's worked really well.
so do you make them take out the laptop and start advancing the slides as they're at the basilica?
No, no, definitely not. When Talia used to travel as a child, they would stop at every one of those little landmark signs and read them aloud as a group. So we do not travel like that. But I think, to your point, the excitement is part of the joy.
Having made 12 weeks worth of your indications PowerPoints as your fellow, I definitely feel for your kids, and I'm sure future and former fellows can relate to that one.
Oh Lord, I'm gonna sound terrible on this podcast. This is not like it seems to all the listeners.
So do you take at least a week off all the time? Because that was one of the principles in this article, was to take a week off, because that's the amount of time it requires for you to wind down and truly settle into vacation mode.
I do. I think a week is almost required. Although I will say this upcoming trip to New Hampshire is more like 5 days for logistical reasons. But I really do think the week it really is the right length. A week, 7 to 10 days would be even better, and I think still manageable. But I believe in that. Do you agree as well?
Yeah, I think I like that. You know, it's valuable time. You might as well make the most of it, especially if you're traveling. And I think, one of the other principles here is, and we talked about it earlier, is needing to go somewhere not home. And if obviously we have the luxury of being able to do that and the means to do it, and I think that helps, because inevitably when you're at home, you always find something to do either in the house, or it reminds you of something. You're just not unplugged,
Yeah,
and I think that is important.
and I agree. One of the articles made the point of, if you are, say you're leaving on Sunday night for your week and you work on Friday and maybe you don't have work on Saturday, when does your vacation start? Does it start on Saturday morning, Friday night? Does it start on Sunday morning? Does it start when you get on the airplane if you're flying? There's different ways to think about it, and each of them have, benefits and negatives. If you wait to start your vacation till you get on the airplane, which is kind of how I've thought about it, to be honest, I don't think that's necessarily the right approach, because then you start the wind down. Then you start getting ready for your week and you've kind of lost something. If you're able to start it earlier, and maybe it's just doing stuff around the house before you get on that plane that day or the next day, but it does, I think, accelerate your ability to get into the vacation mode.
Do you find that you have this kind of pre-vacation anxiety of like having to get a bunch of stuff done before you go so that you feel like you can unwind, or do you not think about that?
Absolutely. Right. I have a list of like 10 things I need to get done this weekend, so that I don't have these things hanging over my head. Now, by the time Tuesday comes, there probably will be 10 more, but at least there won't be 20. That's how I think about it.
For the record, recording this episode is one of those things.
Check. I love it. And then really for us, I mean for anyone in the world, but I think really for us, it really is disconnecting from your phone, from your computer, from your email as possible. We'll talk about that in a second. I really think that's incredibly valuable.
So, what do you, if just from a practice management perspective, how do you prepare? How do you prepare your practice for that? I actually remember a funny anecdote, and you may not remember this. Originally, I was well at the beginning of practice. I went to Taiwan, and I hung out in Taiwan for about 3 weeks. And I guess that's a time that I've been away more than 2 weeks. But I don't consider that vacation. It was work. It was enjoyable work, but it was work. And before going to Taiwan, I had just kind of thought, well, I probably shouldn't see new patients right now, right before leaving, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to see new patients and then say, okay, I got to go uh, hang out and see my partners. And I remember my MA had like sent that out. And then you immediately emailed her back saying, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Dr. D to not see new patients right now. He should continue to see new patients and his partners are available if he needs anything.
Yeah, it's too big of a hit if you don't. And I think
And now I see it. You're absolutely right. But
yeah, because then you're taking a 2 week hit or whatever the magic number is. But we are so lucky, and I say this all the time. And Lindley Wall was out of town, and one of her patients had a new problem develop, and the emergency room was calling to ask that that patient be seen, and I ended up seeing the patient this week. But we are so lucky that we have partners we trust, and even more important than that, partners who we know will do a great job of taking care of any patient. And so that makes it easy. So I do not change anything about my scheduling criteria the week before a vacation. Um, and I do admit I will try to scramble or add cases on before I leave town. But I also, the kind of further along I get, the more content I am handing those patients off, because I think it's a win-win.
and then when you're away and you know that you have patients who are due to come back for post-op visits, how do you handle that? Do you typically have your nurse see them with instructions? Do you leave instructions for a trainee, a senior resident, or a fellow? Or do you just push them until they come back? Do you utilize the expertise of our hand therapy colleagues? How do you do that?
Yeah, if I'm going to be gone a full week, then I'll ask the fellow or resident on my service to run a post-op clinic, post-op and urgent clinic. And I make the patients aware of that. My nurse is there who understands everything. And again, I'm very, very lucky to have a wonderful nurse. And together with the help of the therapist, so it really is three people who all know me in different ways, working together to take care of these post-op patients and get them going in the right direction. Again, the problem with pushing them off till when you come back in town is then you have to add those 6, 8, 10, 12 patients onto your already busy schedule as you return. So it further hampers your, if you want to call it recovery from vacation. So I believe in trying to avoid that. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, pretty much. I do something very similar, and I like having the multiple layers and the multiple types of people who are familiar with your practice. I think that's such a helpful thing. And obviously telling the patients that ahead of time, I think is important, and making sure that you also see them when you come back into town.
Yeah, or call them or whatever. So,
Yeah.
all right, we're getting close to the end, but I want to talk about I want to ask a few key questions. And I will, as I think about these questions and answers myself, I think they are decisions made by myself in concert with my family. So if Tiffany plays a role in these decisions, feel free to acknowledge her. So the first question is, and for putting email aside, but on a routine vacation, do you block out work time?
I don't block out work time, and I don't count the podcast as work, because we did cut a couple of episodes while I was in Houston. And honestly, we're cutting one now on a weekend, and I consider the podcast to be fun and a labor of love. So I don't block out work time. I will admit, I'll check on stuff if there's something of interest to me. In terms of checking, like I do. I don't love coming back to a bunch of like patient things. And if it's stuff that can be triaged and handled by a nurse or an MA or a trainee, who, if they have the time to do it, could help me with that, that'd be great. But I like when I was in Houston, I logged into Epic a couple of times to take care of stuff because I was like, I can call this patient. I actually have the time. My kids are asleep. Like, I don't mind. And I still felt like I was kind of in vacation mode. I perhaps if we're traveling abroad, you can't do that. So that's obviously one thing that's useful. There are vacations where I intentionally do not bring a laptop because that limits my ability to log in and check on things. And it's like, you know what, this is a vacation where I want to completely unplug. And like my most recent one to Houston was not one of those. And I still came back feeling completely recharged. How about you?
I think that's well said. I have never been bold enough not to take my laptop. I think I'd have some kind of weird reaction. I agree with you, though. I mean, the experts would say we shouldn't be logging into Epic on a vacation, and we shouldn't be, working on a paper or whatever. Not that I don't work on a paper intentionally, but if something comes to a head or has to be done, I might do it. The only thing I routinely do on vacation, again, the experts would tell me no, is I try to answer email. Now, as I've gotten better at this, I would say that once or maybe twice a day, I will sit down and deal with emails. Early in the morning before the family wakes up, last thing at night after family may be asleep, I will just deal with emails. To me, it's valuable in that, number one, things continue to get done while I'm away, and two, I don't come back to 1,000 emails. How do you think about emails?
Patient care stuff gets answered right away if it's urgent. And I'm very honest with nurses, MAs, and hand therapists. I say if I'm away, text me or call me if you need something. Like if it's truly like you need an answer, just text me or call me or contact one of my partners. If it's a less urgent thing, but a patient is waiting on something, I'll answer those emails. And then all the other stuff, I'll try to do kind of the separate time while everybody else is, while I don't need to be present with my family. Um, Inevitably, what I try to do is kind of wind down and then do a couple of emails, and then I'll try to open my book or a magazine or something like that.
Yeah, it's a tricky, very slippery slope, but I think we see it the same way. Um,
But I also don't want to have my phone too much because I don't want to get cubital tunnel from holding my phone all the time.
I just don't want to have my phone too much. It's too distracting. For
It
me, it's
is.
all
It
about
is.
books. It's all about books. So, regarding email, do you leave an out of office email? And if you do, is it a standard out of office email, or do you customize it? And maybe it depends on what you're doing and where you're going.
I don't. I because again, the people that truly need to get a hold of me for truly urgent matters know where I'm going to be and they're going to call me or text me. So I don't leave an out of office email. And if I don't think I think I did one time and it was a pretty standard one. It wasn't like, I don't think Our World is one in which you can say something fun or quippy or, sarcastic. It's just that I don't think it flies in Our World. One thing that's interesting is I do know a surgeon who, if they're doing like a big case, will put an out of office email thing. And I'm like they're not going to be available to answer your email today. And I'm like, well, there are a lot of emails in my world that go unanswered for 24 hours. So
That's
I don't know.
interesting.
I feel like it's kind of weird. Do you use the out of office message?
I have not. I see value in it, and certainly peers, both locally and across the country, will use it. Um, I don't know. I have not chosen to do that. I continue to consider it. I'm not going to use it this week because I'm going to be in a place where I can answer emails. But I do tend to be one of those people who, if I'm between cases or between patients, I'll check my email. So I do respond quickly almost always. And so if it is 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, some people might wonder. But the honest answer is, like you said, if someone really needs me, those who, should will know how to get a hold of me directly.
Well, for your upcoming trip, what you should do is leave an out of office email with just a link to download the podcast or to leave a review.
Nice. And maybe your phone number.
Exactly. And call my partner because clearly he is not doing anything right now.
Well,
And to close out, do you do anything that, as you're at the tail end of your vacation to get ready to get back into it?
I think, well, first of all, I don't like to travel the day before I'm going to go back to work, and I fail on that regularly. I tend to be one who stresses about, I would hate to miss a clinic because I got stuck at, traveling or something. But I do like to get back and then get home and then have a good day at home, and maybe the night before, again, email or check up on something. But no, I am better on the back end about not doing work until I return to work. On the front end, I think it's harder for me. How do you think about it?
Yeah, I don't do anything special to ramp back up. I'm usually exercising fiendishly because ate excessively while I was away on vacation, which is always the case. That's my own complex. But aside from that, no, I don't do anything differently. I basically just dread the next clinic because it's always painful, but good to get back into the swing of things. You might as well just get thrown right back in. So.
Yeah, and the vacation memories become just that. They become memories very quickly, unfortunately. But all right, so you and I are going to resolve to do better, take more vacation, and when we're out, try to be out of it more, right? Is that a mutually agreed upon goal?
Yeah, I think we can agree upon that, mainly for your sake, because you sound like you need a vacation more than I do.
I do. I am looking forward to a few days. It will be refreshing.
I guess vacation requires that you actually have a home, so you're already a leg up on me. So
Good luck on that. My basement awaits you if needed.
we might be doing a basement hopping situation. So the Brogans have kindly offered as well. So thank you.
Awesome. I love it. All right. Well, thanks for taking time, and this was fun.
Absolutely enjoy your vacation.
Will do.